Jay has been involved in athletics his entire life as a player, a coach, teacher, and recently retired athletic administrator. Jay's passion for high school athletics has him currently speaking throughout the country on maintaining a safer environment for after-school events. He has been published numerous times and endorsed by both the NIAAA and NFHS. Jay is here today to share best practices on how to run an effective event.
Before we start today, I really need you to jot down any notes that you have and any questions, and at the end, write those questions down at the end, email me and I'll respond back and we'll get all your answers taken care of. I don't know if you saw the national publication back in October 2013 about crime and property crime, violent crime across the country. The recent statistics show that violent crimes rose 15% and property crime rose 12% between 2012 and 2013. And I guess the more alarming statement in that report was that the experts in the field claim that we'll never see another decrease in crime in the future. You know, I used to walk around this country, and like many American citizens, and believe that this crime and all these problems will never happen to me, until I went to a basketball game as an athletic director, visiting athletic director in our community. And we had a very comfortable 15-point lead with 30 seconds left in the game, and being the visiting athletic director, hey, I'm going to beat the rush and I'm going to get out and leave early. That cold Friday, January night changed my life. I walked outside those field house doors, and in the middle of the street, there were some children, some kids. I thought that was a little strange because the weather was quite cold. And seconds later, bam, 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 gunfire. And the gunfire was in line where I was standing. And the bullets were whizzing past my ear and hitting the mortar and the metal behind me. I thought I was in the movie Saving Private Ryan. I stood there in disbelief. Interscholastic sports and all the programs we provide for our community, our parents, our players, our coaches, all the positive things that we do with our schools today, that night it went right down the tube because this was an educational event. The memories of what I experienced are vivid, and there's a lot. I guess maybe that creates a little more passion with as a school official than the average person in this field. We took that experience and we went back on Monday morning at school, and we gathered our troops at the school that worked events, and we started working on plans. And those plans developed over a period of time. We kept adding, deleting, and eventually school officials, other athletic directors in our conference were commenting on how safe they felt when they attended our games. And they said, Jay, why don't you get out there and share this stuff? Because we feel so comfortable when we come to your place. We feel so safe, and a lot safer than the other schools in your community. So basically, that's how Safe Sport Zone started, through a terrible experience, a nightmare. And I guess what's really important is that we are trying to prevent that from happening to anyone. We really believe that we've been extremely helpful. Wherever we've been and we've passed on this information, we've not had any problems in those school districts. So we know one thing, that the plan and the program of Safe Sport Zone works. Why are these problems happening? Well, our research tells us that there's three main ingredients. The parent problems, majority of all the parents in this country are absolutely wonderful. Loving, caring, supportive. But we're talking about a handful of parents. We call them misguided parents, who might have been misled with their parents. We also know that drugs and alcohol are a problem. Ever since the cutbacks in a lot of our anti-drug and alcohol programs have happened, we see a spike in usage. Also, we look at the media violence that's taking place. An average 18-year-old today in this country has seen 40,000 screen murders on TV. So media violence is certainly a player in the ingredients on violence. Guns, staggering amounts. 280 million guns in this country for 310 million people. 90 guns for every 100 people. We manufacture in the world every year 8 million guns. The United States buys 4.5 million. The rest of the world gets 3.5 million guns. We are the most violent, industrialized country in the world. And you got to remember, 2/3 of all the homicides happen with guns. With all these statistics, it's important to understand how one person could carry and conceal this many weapons.
As this student's appearance demonstrates, having a lax policy about dress makes it easy for a student to conceal a weapon and makes it difficult to identify intruders on campus. A dress code can reduce weapons violations, relieve tensions between gangs, reduce disciplinary infractions, and generally improve the atmosphere of the school. Our policy requires that students tuck in their shirts, making the belt line visible at all times. Our students may not wear baggy pants or colors and insignias that are commonly associated with gang activity. This policy was a collaborative effort between the parents, teachers, and administrators in this community.
So what should you do today if you're involved in a shooting? Here's the best advice. Number one, think about running. I'm not talking about law enforcement officers, I'm talking about civilians. Run. And the reason you want to do that is because of the statistics will tell you if you're moving, your chances of being hit is 4 out of 100. Also, if you're moving, chances are, if you are hit, it won't hit your vital organs. That's the reason you want to run. If you can't run, then hide. In either case, whether you're running or hiding, you want to call 911 as soon as possible. That's the best advice I can give you. Also, there's a current statistic in our country, and that is 1 out of 25 students have carried a weapon to school in the last 30 days. Now, the first time I heard that, I thought of a gun. Well, they said weapon, and a weapon can be a razor blade. So we'd like to show you some of just at least one particular internet weapon that's out there, and we're going to demonstrate what it looks like and what it can do. As I mentioned earlier, we cannot provide a safe, 100% safe environment at our games. We can provide a safer environment, and certainly the procedures we talked about are important to implement at your school. As an example, everybody or a lot of people that are attending your games have credit cards. And I got a credit card. And I'm going to show you that credit card. Here it is. It looks like a normal credit card. But is it a credit card is the question. As we take a look at this little device that certainly could be at your games, we'll find out that it can turn into a knife, a weapon. And here's my message. You cannot provide a safe environment at our games. Let me show you an example. Here we have a stake. Of course, let's find out how sharp this credit card really is. This demonstration was not completed to scare you. What we're trying to achieve is to get school officials to create an awareness for change with their contest management policies. This is not a race problem. This is not a neighborhood problem. This is a systems problem that our country is experiencing. In a system that is so difficult to change. If everybody was making $40,000 a year, even working at McDonald's, we might not have as many gang membership participants in our country. That's a systems problem. So remember, Don't be hard on the people. Be hard on the system. So what can we do? Well, I can say this. Safety is all about training. And the power of safety lies in the training of our school officials. And it's important to understand that school officials, the school industry, has a great gap of knowledge that's missing. You know, you go to the collegiate ranks or the professional ranks, and the people who are running those events all came from the military, law enforcement, FBI, Homeland Security. There's probably zero personnel that came from the teaching field. And yet, we've got 18,684 schools in this country that are offering interscholastic sports in our country. And we look at that number and the scope of it, and we believe there's approximately a conservative number of 25 people per school that are working the fall, winter, and spring sport events. Well, if you multiply the 25 times the 18,684 schools, you're going to come up with almost 500,000 people in this country that need to learn new techniques on running events, especially in the security field. Majority of all those people at one time went to school to become a teacher. They're coming from the educational industry they went to school to become a professional educator in the classroom. And some ended up in a superintendency position. Some ended up in an administrative position. But all went to school at one time to become teachers. So we have a unbelievable challenge facing us today, and we will, that's our job. We're always going to be faced with challenges to educate our school officials. So it's important as a school official, working in the industry, to pass this message on. Get trained. Help other school districts. The word of mouth is so important. We need to train school districts, mass quantities. Our goal is to train as many people as we can in one day. Once you receive this certificate after passing your tests, I would highly recommend to laminate it, put it under glass, somehow protect it. In case something would happen in your school and you end up in the legal system, hey, Your Honor, I took the initiative to get trained. Here's my certificate. It doesn't mean you're going to remain immune, but it certainly can help mitigate liability. We have 7 steps in our program today to mitigate liability. And the first one is to build your team. The second is to develop a comprehensive master plan for every imaginable emergency that could happen at an after-school event. Third is to protect the gate. Fourth, build positive relationships with your students, fans, spectators as they enter the games. 5, beware of hot spots, especially your concession area and parking lot after the game. 6, understand what spectator parameter means. And 7th, identify all fans. The first step is to develop your team. Once you have your team, you start developing your plans. So many times I've seen that happen where school administrators will design the plans and then they'll share those plans with your team, and you don't get the buy-in. So remember this. Develop a team and get into the hearts and minds of that team. Get them working together, just like coaching 101. Whatever you practice, it becomes who you are. And as a team, we will never compromise our values. As a team, we work and we think about all the scenarios we're going to face. And when you start hearing questions in your event workers meetings like, what do you do, what do you say, and where you're going to go, you're on the right track. This is what I'm doing and why it's important. You want to hear and you want to build a very pride-orientated group. What we did after that shooting is we built our team, and besides the amount of money, which is very low that we pay them per hour, we decided to get them apparel, just like the same apparel that we gave our coaches and administration in our building. So on Fridays before the big games, they were walking around with their school apparel that we had given them. It was a kind of a buy-in team concept. We're all in the same uniform. We also did some unique things. Every time we had meetings, and we had 4 meetings a year. We had a meeting in the summer where we'd revise the emergency plans for the entire season. We had a meeting in the fall for the football season. We'd have a meeting in the winter for basketball games. And we'd have a meeting at the end of the year to look at our design and see if there's any changes that need to be made. And I'll tell you what, when we did an assessment at the end of the year, we came up with many great ideas. And I'll tell you, when you build that team, amazing things can happen. So here's an example of a meeting. There's many people to the left, probably 20 more. We had 34 people on our team with 10 on a waiting list before I retired. And we had a lot of learning taking place at those meetings. One of the things that they wanted to make sure that if you were hired to work an event, you were going to work an event. I think that one of the major problems in this country, having traveled from Boston to Seattle, is I see that people like to watch the event. They like to get paid and then they sit and watch the game. You can't do that today. You have to work the event. And they like people who can move people in case of an evacuation. You know, if you're not a type of person that can move people, maybe it isn't the right job for you. So these important rules that we established as a team came from the team. Now, we had team rules. We even had a shirt design as an example, a reminder that they came up with these 5 rules that if you wanted to be on this team, you had to follow the 5 rules. And so, as an example, these are just shirts that we had, and on the back we had the team rules. Number 1, be on time with a radio. We don't want cell phones being used. We want a radio, and we want to be on time. In other words, if not only are you in time to work, but if you were in charge of concession area at halftime, we wanted you there before halftime started. Or if you're in the parking lot, you want to be out there before the game was over. Because if something's going to happen, it's going to happen in the first 3 to 5 minutes. 2, you want to dress in security apparel. We don't need somebody coming in with cut-off shorts and flip-flops. We want to look the job. 3, once you're hired to work the event, you're always standing, never sitting, always standing. 4, we're not going to have people using their cell phone for personal use. We're not paying you to socialize with your family or your friends. And 5, scan the assigned area that you've been given. And number 5 is an interesting concept because it's somewhat different. It's called situational awareness. It comes from the aviation field. In the aviation field, the pilot is always looking, thinking, and anticipating. We kind of took that same concept and we train our workers with this same format. Now let's just take this crowd and look at the back wall where you have your banners and kind of divide that crowd into four sections. So if you were assigned to work the game, we would have you assigned one of those sections. And every 30 seconds, not every quarter, every 30 seconds, you'd be looking up there, anticipating, looking for disgruntled faces, people with loud, angry voices. Now that is, to me, what working an event is. So even suspicious behavior, let's say somebody gets up and goes to the bathroom and comes back every 10 minutes. You know, that could be a possible drug bust going on, drug sale. You got to be thinking all the time and anticipating and preventing a problem from happening before it gets out there and escalates. This takes practice. You have to practice this. We practice it in the lunchroom in our school because there's so many opportunities to do the same type of work. Contest management has 4 phrases. Number 1 is the preparedness, the plans. Number 2 is the response. Okay, you got the plans, and let's see if you can exercise those plans. 3 is the recovery. In case something would happen, let's take a lightning at a weather issue at a football game, where you have to evacuate the stadium and wait the 30 minutes. And at the end of the 30 minutes, you want to regain that game. Well, that's recovery. And 4, the assessment, as I mentioned before, you know, at the end of any type of game, season, year, you want an evaluation from your team. You want to hear, how can I become better? It's called continuous improvement. And we need to put that in the agenda as far as schools becoming better and better on after-school events. Your potential team, this is just some ideas. You know, it can range from certainly you want a PA announcer in there, you want your game manager, you want law enforcement, somebody representing law enforcement, somebody representing the medical field, athletic trainer. But when you're building your team, you want to make sure that everybody has one belief. They understand the value of educational-based sports. And that's important. If you've got somebody that doesn't think there's value, you probably want to remove them because they're not going to be a team player. Let's think about the plans. And let's think about how to develop those plans. I want you to think about your family. And do you have a family disaster plan? Do you have a family disaster kit? 1 out of 6 Americans have one. 5 out of 6 don't. See, again, we believe it's not going to happen to us. And then we can even have a power outage for days, for all you know. And, it's important to start planning ahead. So it's just planning ahead. And so we take that same concept and we move it into high school games, and we think about what could happen there. Well, middle school children attending games without any supervision, power outages. Think about videotaping females and all of a sudden they're on Facebook, making sure that your media are identified with some type of identification. Storming the courts, certainly that's a problem. So you want to come up with a plan for each and every hazard that could happen at your games. One of the important ones is having an after-school emergency plan. We have them, they're color-coded, they fit in a cash box, easy to identify, very quick. We want to always plan, prevent, and prepare. Most common emergencies are probably going to be the medical injuries, somebody getting injured on the field or the court, or certainly weather issues. But let's think about the 14 legal duties for those that are in administration. I know you know what I'm talking about. Out of the 14 legal duties, we have 6 of those duties at after-school events. We have a duty to plan. We have a duty to supervise. We have a duty to provide a safe playing condition. We have a duty to forewarn. We have a duty to provide emergency care and an emergency plan. I want you to think when you design these plans to follow airport security. Even though at the LAX, I was very, very surprised to see that happen because anytime I fly and go around the country, I feel pretty safe inside an airport. We want to use that same concept, screening the gate, containing the facility, screening the gate, and be consistent. Every time you get on an airplane, flight attendants tells you the same safety issues. We want to do the same thing. We want to be consistent with everything we do. Radio communication, we don't believe in color-coded radio communications. We believe in what, where. What's the problem and where is it happening? I have a physical altercation out in the parking lot. That's good information. Too many times I've seen people when something does happen, they get pretty emotional and they forget to give us their location. So what, where is an easy way to get the information that you need with that radio. Developing an A and B plan. There's been lawsuits that have come down over the years where schools did not have an A and a B plan. What I mean by that is a regular game, Tuesday night, not a big crowd, just a regular game, is an A plan. And in a big game, a conference championship, winner goes to state, and a sectional finals, something where it could be a sellout, that's a big game. So you have to provide a plan, regular game, and a B plan for big games. You might look at you might have two bleachers out with a big game and one bleacher out with a game. You might have your concessions located somewhere else. You might have separate exits and entrances and separate bathrooms and separate concession areas in a big game. But remember, as much as you can, separate the crowd as much as you can, whether it's an A or B game. Understand your state and national rules. Your event workers need to know that. They need to know the current rules or changing rules and keeping abreast of what is taking place at the higher levels. Post-game parking lots and doors, we got to make sure people are at the doors as they exit. not allowing people from the outside in, person with a radio. And we have to understand that the most two volatile areas at a game are the concession area and the parking lot. So we want to move with the crowd. And certainly if there is an incident that happens, we want to report it as soon as possible. Your superintendent doesn't want to read this in the newspaper. So important to have an incident report available if something would happen. Now, the courts have always consistently ruled that schools must, and I repeat, must provide a reasonable standard of care. So if anything ever happens in your school, come back to this phrase: did you provide a reasonable standard of care? We won't allow certainly loitering. We recommend that you don't. Keep everybody seated other than the student section. Also, be aware that you have to be visible. And the best way to be visible is with some type of security apparel. Now we recommend a yellow, because yellow, brain research will tell you that yellow alerts the brain. That's why we have yellow school buses. Yellow is the best color. But we also like the light, sleeveless, very bulky, light, very nylon, with certainly event staff on the back, easy to see. But this piece of apparel can go over a coat outside, can be worn inside. We always get them back too. You know, no one's going to wear this to the grocery store on Sunday. So it's a piece of apparel that is extremely important. I want you to think, if you're having a cardiac arrest or you're a seizure at a game, or one of your loved ones are experiencing some type of medical emergency, you want to identify security help very quick. So you don't want to you don't have your security in your school colors. That's the last type of apparel that you want your security to be wearing. Very bright yellow, something that you can see and identify extremely fast. Now, let's talk about evacuations, because we have to do that as being responsible today. You might have a gas leak for all you know. You need to have a plan to evacuate. Here's what we were doing and we are recommending. At every football and every basketball, girls and boys games, we would evacuate after the game. Say, you know, we are the best country when it comes to fire drills. Since you are at kindergarten all the way up to senior high school, 12th grade, we practice all the time. We practice, practice, practice. As a coach, you play the way you practice. So holding a one-time evacuation isn't really useful. You want to be able to know exactly what you're going to do, and you have to practice. So we practice throughout the fall and winter season. Here's what we do. We take some barricade tape, and at the end of the game, kind of envision this, at the end of the game, after the players and officials leave the court and people are exiting, we wait for 8 minutes. And we play some music and so forth. And at the end of the 8-minute mark, we shut the music off. We have personnel at the top of the bleachers with a stretched barricade tape all the way the length of the bleachers. And at the same time, an announcer will make an announcement. Thank you for attending tonight's game. Our next game will be Tuesday, whatever the date is, and whoever we're playing. And at this time, we're going to clear the field house. Thank you for your cooperation. Remember, thank you for your cooperation. And at that time, the workers with the yellow tape at the top of the bleachers would start walking down the bleachers simultaneously. Here comes the yellow wave. And at the same time, we have these nice, courteous announcements. People get the idea. They start moving. And what we're trying to do at the end of 7 minutes from the time we started this exercise, we want everybody out of the field house or out of the football stadium. We want to move people out. And outside on the apron or in the field house lobby, we want to have waiting areas for visiting teams and home teams. And we want some police officers out there between the two groups. But we want them out of the stadium or out of the field house in 15 minutes after the game. Now, we don't tell them it's an evacuation. This is just standard procedures. But if something would happen, let's say we did have a gas leak, we would be prepared. We would not only be prepared, we would have exercised this and know exactly what to do. PA announcer is very important. I would suggest that your PA announcer, voice of your game, get certified. NASPA, NASPA, NASPAA. I'll repeat that. The National Association of Sport Public Address Announcers Association, NASPAA, look them up online. They have a program for announcers for collegiate, pro, and high school. And I would suggest that your announcer get involved. It's a $35 annual fee, and they can test out and certify. But I would say that if you are working with your announcer, you want to test out the scripts that he or she has written out before the year starts, going over scripts of emergency, evacuations, all sorts of events that could take place. Practice and get to know your announcer and work with him or her so they can become a better announcer at these games. Officials are on your team too. Usually the officials are causing some of the irate fans to get angry. Unfortunately, they're part of your team, and it's important that you have a great rapport with them. I know that we understand one thing, it's called my job, your job. They are going to take care of the court or the field, and we are going to take care of the bleachers and surroundings. An official should never stop the game because of some type of behavior in the stands. That's the whole school's responsibility. So we have an exit plan designed with them. We are always providing water, towels, and parking. We provide parking right up front by the closest door from the field house or the football game. We'll take a parking spot and we'll put a sleeve over the top, having officials identified. Take care of your officials. How about texting security concerns? A new product on the market where you can, in the high schools, that you can text in a problem before it happens. During a game, if I was with my family and I'm sitting in section K, row 13, and some kids are using some foul language, or they're pushing, shoving, or whatever it might be, or it could be a fight, a potential fight in the bathroom. I could pull out my cell phone and I could text in a short code, a number and a code, and it would go into a system and it would respond back to me and ask me briefly, what is your incident, where's your location? I'm in section K at row 13 and these kids are using some foul language. Well, as a school event worker staff, I can cover more territory because I have more people managing the game. And it's a nice tool in preventing problems from escalating. Step 3, protect the gate. Similar to airport security, we want to contain the facility and limit our access control points, our gates. The more gates you have, the more people you're going to need to screen that particular gate. Crime prevention through environmental design has been around since post 9/11. Basically, it's designing a physical environment that influences human behavior. Similar to Great America, the theme park, or Disney World, you have a meticulous, clean environment, and you notice that people most likely don't litter. That is exactly what we're talking about. So your schools can work on this. Your schools, the first thing you should do is get out and assess your facility from the outside, from the parking lot, from the walkways, adjacent buildings, and look at what a fan would see entering your facility. You want to ask yourself 2 questions. Number 1, can you see? And number 2, can you be seen? A variety of different things you can do. In every school's different. I noticed one time when we did this, we took out a big trophy case in the lobby of the field house, and we had such a better view of all the fans and participants coming into our game. That's what we're talking about, looking at this and asking yourself and assessing it, what can I do to improve that view? Second part of this is the access control point. That's screening the gate, making sure whether you're doing visual searches or whether you're doing the handheld metal detector or checking a photo ID. We're going to screen that gate, that access control point. Lighting helps. You definitely need to have bright lights. You could have cameras running, but territorial reinforcement is once you enter that facility, signs directing your fans where to go, home, away, bathrooms, visitors, home, away, all sorts of signs allowing them to understand where they're allowed to go and where they're not allowed to go. Unauthorized personnel locker rooms certainly should have a sign up identifying. And the last thing is the maintenance of the facility. Not only in the front gate, when you walk in, do you have fences that might be down or broken, or chains that might be broken, litter, just common sense. Once you get into the facility and outside the facility, a clean, well-maintained facility is very important. Well, we have some new challenges, unfortunately, that we need to start looking at. The possibility of explosives are extremely low, but at the same time, you can't count them out. There's 3 types of explosives. There's military, commercial, and homemade. And we're more concerned about the homemade, the chemistry kitchens of the world today, and a lot of stuff on the internet, and we know through our research that people are playing around with explosives at home. So, whether foreign or domestic, we need to be aware of these situations. We can't forget about the Oklahoma-Kansas State football game with Joel Hendricks in the third in 2005. He brought a homemade bomb called the Mother Satan in a backpack surrounded with nuts and bolts and all sorts of metal debris. So he was thinking about injuring others. He didn't come there with all that metal in the backpack, detonating this and just killing himself as he did. He didn't enter the stadium. Bomb went off outside the stadium. You could have heard it 5 miles away. Fact is that happened in 2005. Boston Marathon happened in 2013. And now just recently in Maryland, at the Maryland Mall, we had a shooting. The child killed himself, and in the backpack there was a 3-pound bomb. So it's something that we need to create an awareness for change in policy because of what we're seeing in our society. If you're going to be building a new stadium, a new facility, remodeling, you might want to start thinking about barriers in the entrance ways. Think about protecting that venue, your school, by putting in bollards and planters and changing the surface, anything that would prevent a vehicle from penetrating that venue. Lighting. A lot of our facilities in the country, high schools, don't have adequate lighting. Lighting is a deterrent for crime. So providing additional lighting, if you don't have the lighting that you feel comfortable with, we suggest to get temporary lighting. These power diesel generated lights that you can find on construction sites at night on the highways is exactly what we're talking about. If you have lights, then you can have cameras. And we use cameras all the time, shirt pocket camcorders. Most facilities in athletics do not have surveillance cameras. It's cost prohibitive. So we believe in shirt pocket camcorders that people can pull out at the concession area or in the parking lot after a game if there could be a possible physical altercation. Cameras are extremely positive today, very, very powerful. Nobody wants to get caught on a camera. And at the same time, if you don't have adequate lighting in that parking lot, we suggest high density flashlights. This one right here is law enforcement uses this. This is $29, but I'll tell you the big difference between a flashlight and a high density flashlight. If you're going to use cameras, you must have a sign. You must provide signage, letting the spectators know that you're filming. Our website, safesportzone.com, has all sorts of posters that you can purchase, very reasonable. If you get them, I would suggest to laminate them. They're going to last longer, but signage is really important. News releases are important. You don't want spectators coming to an event, surprise, 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 we got a new policy. So marketing the information is extremely important. Making sure you get on the radio or in the newspaper and provide all this information well in advance. The attending high school events is a privilege sign. It's probably the most important one we should have on every high school event in the country. Attending high school events is a privilege, not a right. It's not like college or pro. College or pro, you pay your ticket, you can say whatever you want. Not at high school. High school behavior should be the same at the game as it is during the day, in the cafeteria, in the hallways, or in the classroom. And parents and spectators need to know that. And unfortunately, we've had some incidences in the country We've had to ban spectators from high school events. I would recommend, if you're going to do that, do not ban them for the whole season or the whole year. You're talking about their greatest commodity. You're going to have a lot of resistance. I would suggest to send them a letter and delay it, pending an investigation. We will meet at this certain date, make it 4 games maybe, and then bring this parent or spectator back in, making sure you have a meeting and discuss those expectations so they have a clear understanding. If it happens again, you will ban them for the rest of the year. Be fair, but have courage. We have to take the stand, and because of that handful that we're talking about of people that are causing all these problems, they need to be addressed. Don't let it continue. Inappropriate music, some of the music that's being played before the game or halftime is so inappropriate. The lyrics, the school doesn't even know what's being said in the lyrics. Sexual innuendos, degrading women, drugs, alcohol, violence, and these people are playing this music in a school function. I suggest that you screen your music. What we did is we went to conference music, conference bylaw music. Everybody in our conference, they're playing the same music. We had 275 songs that we identified that was appropriate. Kids picked them, change it every year, upgrade it. If you want those songs, just email me. I'll send them to you. We think that it's important that you zero in on what's being played at the games. Visual searches, you have to train your staff. It's important to understand all you're doing is looking. You're asking them to open their coats. You're just looking, you're not touching. Making sure you have a flanked police officer to the right or left in case you do find something, a bottle or a weapon. Police officer can take over from there. But I say this is going to be the future. You need to have some preventive step at that screening, at that gate, and asking for a visual search is just going to be the norm years to come. Looking for a weapon that imprinted in a pocket or a muzzle sticking out of a coat. Bottles. We've been doing this for 5-6 years, and over the 5-6 year period, we only had 2 groups come in, one football, one basketball game, where they saw the visual searches being conducted and they turned away and left. Prevent. If you're going to do this, you're going to have a sign, though. You're going to have a sign displayed. It has to be marketed, and after a while, it just becomes the norm. But always talking through these important procedures, getting the spectator to understand why we're doing it. It's very important to have some. Here's a example. We don't super wand like this anymore. All we do is we send the wand up the back and down the front. Getting a wand today that has 2 modes is important. As an example, if you have the mode for the beeper, that's great. If you go over a belt buckle, it's going to beep. But also have the mode for a vibrating, low vibrating handle. So if you do go over a weapon, you know it's there. They don't know that you know. It's important to look at the newer models, and if you're going to buy one, I would suggest to buy one. Put it in your safe until you need it someday. They're hard to get sometimes, depending on the time of the year. I know when the Super Bowls come around, real hard to get the wands. I would suggest that if you need one, you've got it there waiting for you. They're about $164 all the way down to $49. You know what this country needs? The United States needs a consistent bag-sized template on what we're going to allow into our games. Whether it's professional, collegiate, or high school, we ought to have a universal size template. In other words, Major League Baseball just came out with a 12 by 12 by 6 Ziploc clear bag, and I'd be fine with that, because whatever it is, we ought to be universal. So it's like going to the airport. You wouldn't go to the airport without your ID. Same theory when you're going to our games. It's just one size fits all. Safe Sports Zone and the NIAAA have been advocating a 12 by 12 by 12 size. We can easily change that. But whatever it is, we should prohibit, because you can search bags. That's very timely and very costly. We feel that we just prohibit is the easiest way to not have any bottleneck crowds at your gate. It's the way to go. The question that we need to ask ourselves in this country is, what are we willing to give up in as far as privacy for the sake of security? That's the key question that we're going to have to continue to ask ourselves in the United States, because this country has changed. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, go over to Israel. You'll understand real quick. You know, you think about the Boston Marathon incident and the open air access events, and how are we going to contain, how are we going to protect our fans in that scenario? You know, are we going to run the buffer zone out 3-4 miles out? No, we can't do that. It's cost prohibitive. So we believe that prohibiting the bags or searching the bags is the only opportunity you have. We can't say we're going to absolutely have a safe environment today. We can't promise anybody that. But we can promise them that we'll have a safer environment by putting us some easy procedures in place. See, this is not about the bags, it's about the people. Building positive relationships with your fans, spectators, and especially your students is so important today. Pew Research Center conducted this survey a few years back. They surveyed over 20,000 teens throughout the country, randomly. And after they conducted it, something jumped on the front page of the news. 14.9%, 15% of the teens said they would not live past 35 years old. Ladies and gentlemen, that's true. The problem that I'm talking about, youth violence, is going to be greater than we could ever imagine. We have a risky lifestyle. I don't care about myself. I don't care about you. 15% of the teens, 5% is a big number. 15% is a huge number. If this survey is true, Pew Research does a very valid survey. I want you to understand, we have a lot of anger coming up from the youth grassroots. Displaying a positive environment at the gangs, keeping as many students involved as you can. I mean, you have your players and your managers and your cheerleaders and your pom and your pep band and your mascot. We even have a greeter at the door handing out programs, and community will buy into that too. And recognizing them. Not only anybody that works games, could be your students, could be your leader, your student section. Bringing that student, it's a plaque that costs $7 to $10, and bringing them down at halftime and recognizing them in front of the entire crowd. People that have been with you are instrumental in your staff, police officers, game managers, custodians. When you recognize them, things get accomplished. Reward, reward, reward. Well, let's take a look at a game that this child is just having fun. But let's see how well the administration handled this.
Bleachers. Come on down here. You know that's not appropriate. All right, Steve. You need to come with me now. We're going to go out and talk to you. Steve, you know that type of behavior will not be tolerated at ball games. We cannot have that kind of behavior. You can't yell out those names like that.
Why not? They do it in college games all the time. We're just having fun.
Well, this is not a college game. We have to maintain the rules and regulations of the Southeast Conference. And if we don't do that, I'm going to have to ask you to leave.
You can't tell me what I can and can't do.
You know better than that. Officer, we've got a student that needs to be escorted out of here. Officer.
Hey, you're not welcome back on the property. If you come back, you will be arrested for trespassing.
People behave unsportsmanlike in the stands and yelling and screaming. That is not a want. It's not a want. Nobody wants to behave that way. And according to our child psychiatrists that we work with, if it's not a want, then it's a need. And it's important that your event workers know that this is a need that's taking place. Of those needs, if you look at them, that child was hovering between fun and belonging to the school. He's probably connected to that game by being a leader and being funny in the crowd. But the one need that happens 90% of the time is power. This person probably is controlling his family, his business, kind of a control freak. It comes to the game, could be the booster club president, bank president, and all of a sudden he or she cannot control the official's call. And they might be a little stressed out. All of a sudden they go into the red zone because they can't handle it. It's important your event workers understand how this takes place. We have a couple rules from the team. Number one, anger does not work. Anybody gets angry, probably need to remove them from that position. We don't want people going up to a stands and addressing an angry fan with anger. Let's talk about anger for a minute. This is Human Anatomy 101. In the base of the brain, part of the central nervous system, there is a little thing called amygdala. It's the bus driver of the brain. All your feelings come from the amygdala. Happiness, sadness, frustration, anger. Those feelings go up to the cortex. And in the frontal cortex, in the frontal lobe, is where reasoning and judgment takes place. If those issues and that anger isn't dealt with properly, we end up going into the red zone. Our rule 101 that we had was, what's your number one rule as far as working events? And that answer would be, keep everybody out of the red zone. Because if you keep everybody out of the red zone, you're not going to have physical altercations. So we want to address these problems early. Early intervention is really important. This frontal lobe isn't developed in human life until age 29. We have kids that are 16, 17 years old. They have years to go on developing the frontal lobe. And we have parents that never developed the frontal lobe. We have inmates in prison that have never developed the frontal lobe. So it's important to understand how anger really works. We have a format we use, we train with. It's called responsibility training, choice theory. Everything we do as far as dialoguing at a game is in a question format. We have a real simple one sentence. It's broken down in 3 different areas. 1, I'm sorry. Apologizing. How can a person who's angry get mad at you for apologizing? 2, we're going to be respectful and we're going to call them by ma'am, sir, young lady, young man, unless you know their name. And 3, we're going to ask a question. You can prepare your own statements ahead of time and work on it. Again, we work on this in our lunchroom. Can I help you? It's a simple question. But they're going to come back. If you put it in a question format, you're going to get a response. Now, if that response is, well, we're going somewhere else on that. But if that response is courteous, and most of the time, they understand why you're up there. They understand why you came all the way up to address their behavior. And they're probably going to say, I'm sorry, won't happen again. That'll happen about 50 to 60% of the time. What you want is you want to de-escalate. De-escalate. You want to diffuse this problem. You don't want to escalate it. We'll take care of that problem. We'll correct it on Tuesday or Monday after the game on Friday. There's no time clock. And you know, educators, teachers in particular, because they've been involved in classroom management, they correct behavior all the time immediately. It's a hard habit to break. But you know what? We have to do that. Our best people working games in the bleachers are female counselors. They learn to lower their voice and ask pertinent questions. They're not attacking. They're not challenging. It's amazing how well developed counselors are with this task. Important thing is to be courteous, consistent, using common sense, but be courageous. You have to address these issues. Helpful tips. Dalai Lama says that anger is a false sense of ourself. What does he mean by that? He means that you can't control your amygdala. That's what he means. Your frontal lobe can't control that anger. So next time you get angry, think about that. Work on it as an individual in your own personal life. But diffuse the problem. I mean, everybody knows that's the way to go today. We have a moral obligation today. Respect all life, all human life, all levels. You know, this is all about training your staff to be courteous, respectful at all times. And if you don't have that person behaving that way, don't put them in there. Don't allow that to happen. Take a stance and make sure that, give them a chance to change. But if they don't change, don't have them work. you're just asking for a problem. Step 5 and 6, beware of hotspots and spectator parameters. Hotspots are cafeteria at halftime. We would separate cafeterias in big games, or the parking lot. Parking lot at the end of the game. There's a lot more problems today in the parking lots and in the concession areas than the game itself. So making sure you have the proper personnel out there, be visible, and have your workers move with the crowd. Here's a mistake, and your event workers need to be, common sense. If you see something of this nature, a water wheel that close to a playing field, that's a problem waiting to happen. Here's another mistake, locked doors. This is a fire code. And if somebody thinks they can lock doors today, if something would happen, you wanted to exit this door, it would be very difficult. So making sure that your event workers understand codes and violations that could happen. Upset at the football or basketball game. Understand that it's the team that is the underdog who might be beating the favorite. That should send a red flag up to you. Understand, realizing that something of this nature could happen. We just had a very terrible accident happened at a college game, USC and Stanford the other night. There were 10 people who went sent to the hospital. And how can you in the courts protect yourself in a legal lawsuit if that would happen? Well, Your Honor, we had PA announcements, we had messages, we had in our program, no storming of the court. Media warnings are your best bet. But making sure that you have personnel down by the student section, if that is a potential problem, letting them know that this is not going to happen. Then if it happens, it happens. But at least in the courts, you can show in a document that this took place. Taking camera footage of that is very important, so you have some documentation. This game that happened just recently, and we've had numerous ones, high school games, people get injured. And people have been injured with not only the storm in the court, but hanging on the goalposts and goalposts breaking and then carrying it off, and the goalpost hits an eye, and there's all sorts of lawsuits that have taken place. So it's important to know that storming the court or allowing that to happen, you're just asking for problems in the end. That's what brings me up to the most cost-effective way to reduce risk at all our high school events. And we should be doing this nationally. And schools are moving in that direction right now. Hemet, California, Farmington, New Mexico, Riverhead, New York, and Long Island. Many school districts are moving in this way, and that is to identify all fans, not just students, all fans. Everybody that attends a game should have a photo ID. We go from anywhere from Boston to Seattle, and you go into any school, whether it's high school, middle school, elementary school, and if you're a visitor, including parents, you have to show a photo ID during the day. But yet, after 4 o'clock, that's not the same situation. So why are we not requiring a photo ID for everyone entering our buildings after school? That's a question that should be asked everywhere. We provide education after school. We provide a lot of education in our activity programs, whether they're fine arts, interscholastic sports, the musicals, the dramas, a lot of education taking place. So it doesn't make sense that we would not follow the same format as we do during the day. The NIAAA, they've already got it in their books. It's already documented. They want everybody, every spectator, for all events to show some form of ID. So I think this is just going to eventually happen. Eventually we need leaders in our schools to step up and say, it's time to put an easy, very cost-effective procedure for the safety of our fans. Again, go back to the same question. What are we willing to give up in privacy for the sake of security? And this is another example. I like simple, consistent procedures and policies that you can put in place that would change dramatically the game and the environment. And I look at two. One, as a school, not allowing bags that are larger than 12 by 12 by 12 to enter. To me, that's an easy, marketable procedure policy to put in place. I also like the photo ID, the most cost-effective way to reduce risk. You know, we went through 6 years in our community where we had fights and shootings and weapon discharges. As soon as we put the photo ID in place, everything stopped, knock on wood. When they know you know who's attending, changes the entire game. And you know, it doesn't make sense that in our country, we are not identifying fans at our game. I would strongly recommend that you look at getting this procedure in place as soon as possible. And again, remember what I told you in the beginning, 4 or 5 years out. What's it going to be like? Why are you waiting? Go and take the step. Many school districts have done this throughout the country. It's moving. We just need courageous leaders like yourself to get the photo ID as a requirement to attend games. In closing, let me just say this. Wayne Gretzky, probably the most famous hockey player to ever play the game, was telling some young kids his philosophy on the ice. He said, don't skate to where the puck is. Skate to where the puck's going to be. We need to take that same concept forward. We need to understand that what you're doing today is really what you're going to be doing 4 years from now. Put the procedures in place for 4 years from now. Don't wait. Be proactive. We're talking about a different society today. A society that has totally changed from 10 years ago. We don't know who's coming through that gate, who's mentally unstable, who's carrying if you're not screening. Plan for the worst and hope for the best.